Welcome back to Spilling Tea. Before we get started with the heavy, because today's episode is a bit of a doozy, I wanted to lighten the mood just a bit and draw attention to how adorable my shirt is. I bought this off of Shein for like $6. It says Amity Island. It's got this adorable, cute pink shark on it. The bottom says clear skies, gentle surf, warm waters. Love it. Fun fact about myself, I'm a huge fan of Jaws 1 and 2. And typically, when summer season starts, which for me is usually in April, because that's when I make the final payment to the beach house for the summer vacation, I start getting all jazzed up and I want to watch 5 core movies that I watch to kick off my summer season. Jaws 1 and 2, and then The Great Outdoors and Summer Rental with John Candy. I love that dude. He was an amazing actor. And then I'm an 80s kid, so I absolutely love The Goonies. So I just wanted to share that with you because this episode is going to be pretty brutal, because today we are talking about something that I like to call everyone docking at the port. And if that phrase just made your stomach do a flip-flop, congratulations, because your intuition has already checked in and this episode is for you. Before anybody panic scrolls, let me be clear. This is not a purity lecture, although if the word purity feels like a closed door that you missed out on a long time ago, take a deep breath. Because the truth is, purity was never meant to be something that you earned. It's something that God restores. Scripture says in Isaiah 1:18, though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. And that's such a powerful picture and a reminder that purity isn't about perfection or getting it right the first time. It's about grace and being made new. So it's never too late. Also, this episode is not a shame spiral or you're bad for wanting connection moment. Wanting to be wanted is human. Being open isn't a flaw. Being warm, available, interesting, magnetic, all of those lovely adjectives, that's not the problem. That's literally you marketing what you have to offer. The problem is what happens when every ship that notices your fabulous light is allowed to dock with no questions, no limits, no boundaries, just vibes. And vibes, unfortunately, they're not a background check. At first, it feels flattering. People come to you and they choose you, or it feels like they do. They might text back fast. They use full sentences, which in today's society is like an anomaly. And you're like, wow, this is what being valued feels like. But slowly and quietly, that feeling starts to shift. You stop feeling chosen and you start feeling used, like a 24-hour emotional gas station with very good lighting. Because when people treat you like their personal amusement park, a place they can visit when they're bored, lonely, or craving distraction, they're not actually seeing you. They're accessing you. And sometimes, and this one stings, they're with you because they can't be with the person they actually want. Somebody else didn't text back. Someone else set boundaries in a relationship with them that they didn't like. Somebody else blocked them and then went to therapy. So here they come, knocking at your port like, hey, stranger, remember me? And let's be honest, that's just translation for want to hang out at the club, grab a drink, and make this easy. You're not the destination. You're the emotional layover, the just for now, the until this other situation resolves itself. You're not chosen for who you are. You're chosen because you're making yourself available when the person they really want is unavailable. So they consume you. They ride the fun parts. They unload their feelings. They borrow your magnificent warmth like a hoodie they swear they'll return, but they never do. And then they leave, emotionally rejuvenated, spiritually moisturized, fully intact, while you're left sweeping up the emotional popcorn thinking, why do I feel so hollow? And why am I so pissed off at myself? for allowing this to happen again. That's the shallow feeling that nobody warned you about, because even if you mattered in the physical moment, you weren't held, you weren't protected, you weren't considered, and you definitely weren't cherished like you should be. You were just accessed and used. And over time, that kind of access erodes at your self-worth. Not dramatically and not all at once, just in small, almost unnoticeable ways. A little piece of you here, a little more there. Because every time you give yourself away, your body, your heart, your attention, to someone who hasn't shown they can honor it, you start to disconnect from your own value. Not because you've lost it, but because you've misplaced it in the hands of someone who was never meant to define it. And slowly, you begin to settle. You start confusing attention with intimacy and availability with value. You start thinking that being chosen, even temporarily, means you're worthy. Instead of remembering you were already worthy before anyone ever chose you, or in this case, accessed you. So no, this episode isn't about closing yourself off. It's about becoming selective and remembering your worth. Because let's face it, not every ship out there deserves a landing. Some deserve to just sink and rot at the bottom. And you are not an amusement attraction either. You are a place that requires care. So let's pour the tea. I know that was a long intro. Let's lower the gates. Let's check those credentials, because today we are docking selectively. I am more of a visual learner, so let's make this visual. Strictly PG, everybody can relax. Imagine your life as a port, a beautiful one, well-maintained, good lighting, functional systems, strong structure, excellent coastal vibes. It's the kind of port that ships want to dock at. They see it on Instagram and they go, wow, 5 stars, would anchor here again. Now imagine one day you decide anyone can pull in. I'm not going to require inspections, no manifest, no what's your business here. No questions asked, just vibes. And oh boy, those ships start pulling in. Some arrive with gifts. Some arrive with chaos and say, I'm just passionate. Some are visibly leaking oil and insist that's just how they operate. And some are actively on fire, but assure you they've done the work. Nothing to see here. Nothing to be alarmed about. Some refuel, take everything not bolted down, and disappear like your favorite ex. At first, you feel flattered. Wow, so much interest in my port. But eventually, you're exhausted. Your equipment has become damaged. Your shoreline is eroding. And you're standing there like, what was this port even built for? Romance? Trade? Peace? Kind of feels like I'm running a crisis center here. When attention becomes the price of admission, you don't feel wanted. You feel used up. And here's the truth that we usually learn late, sometimes after a few unnecessary and painful situationships. Attention is not rare. Access is rare. Attention is easy to come by. It shows up when people are bored, lonely, avoiding their own feelings, or freshly rejected by the person they actually wanted. So now they're circling like sharks who smelled one tiny drop of validation. Hey, you up? Desire alone is not a credential, just like curiosity is not commitment, and chemistry is not character. Your hormones are not a background check. When you confuse someone wants me with someone values me, you start giving depth to people who showed up with a freaking snorkel. You start mistaking a rival for contribution. Just because they pulled in doesn't mean they're unpacking anything or staying. That's when ships begin docking that were never meant to stay. Ships with no paperwork, no timeline, no plan whatsoever, and absolutely no intention of cleaning up after themselves. They take up space. They cause wear and tear. They demand accommodation without accountability, like long-term guests who never buy groceries. And every time you allow it, a big old SOS gets sent out there to sea, not just to them, but to their friends. This port doesn't ask questions. This port doesn't require anything from you, no alignment. This port is always open and it never says no. You will not get rejected here. Access is automatic, but value is optional. And let's be honest, because honesty is the whole point. Being wanted feels really good. Being desired feels powerful, especially when your self-esteem is running on fumes. Attention feels like relief, like emotional Tylenol. It's very effective, but it wears off fast. Because when intimacy is fueled by attention instead of respect, it doesn't nourish you. It just stimulates you. So afterward, you don't feel fuller. You feel scattered, tired, weirdly emptier than before. Intensity gives you a spike, while validation gives you a rush. But neither gives you roots. They don't anchor you. They don't steady you. They don't integrate you back into yourself. So when the attention fades, and it always does, you're left wondering why you feel more fragmented than before, why you feel less grounded, less clear, less like yourself. Not because something is wrong with you, but because what you received wasn't real intimacy. It was just distraction. And here's the uncomfortable part, the one that would probably all like to skip but can't because it's pretty important to this episode. When a port is always open, people take notice, not through gossip, not because anyone held a meeting or compared notes. They notice through pattern, through how easy it is to enter, how little resistance there is, how no one ever gets turned away, how the lights are always on, the doors unlocked, and somebody saying, "It's fine, really." And slowly but quietly, you become the place people return to when something better shuts them out. When a higher standards port says, "This isn't good enough for me." When something more exclusive asks for clarity, for effort, for emotional literacy. When real intimacy shows up with requirements and they decide that feels suspiciously like homework, that's when they circle back, not because you're less valuable, but because you're more accessible. You become the familiar harbor, the forgiving shoreline, the port that doesn't ask follow-up questions, the port that's open, late, understaffed, and somehow still offering snacks. The "you up" report, the remember me port. The "I just need something easy right now, and I promise I'll figure out my life later" port. And if we're being honest, you're probably already thinking of somebody with this reputation. Maybe it's the friend or the ex that everybody calls on when their current relationship tanks. Maybe it's the person who's always fine with keeping things casual. Maybe at some point it's been you. I know I've made some bad choices in my life that I would like to have a redo. Not because we lack boundaries entirely, but because we were taught that being needed was the same as being valued. And listen to me, this doesn't happen because you lack depth. It happens because you have depth, but no gate. And over time, that openness starts to harden into an unsavory reputation. Not for discernment, not for intentional connection, not for being cherished, but for availability, for being accommodating, for being the place people land when they don't want to be alone, but they also don't want to grow. And here's the cruel irony, the part that really stings. The more you abandon yourself to keep the port open, the less likely the people capable of valuing it will dock there at all. Because aligned ships don't look for unlimited access. They look for structure, for standards, for ports that aren't afraid to say, "State your business." They don't want to compete with chaos. And they definitely don't want to dock where everything has docked for them and gets in with no questions asked. They want a place that knows its worth and proves it by having gates. Because gates don't make a port unwelcoming, they make it intentional. And the ships that can meet you there, they don't resent the gate, they respect it. Boundaries aren't walls, they're doors with locks. They don't exist to keep good people out, they exist to make sure the right people know how to come in. And no, you don't owe anybody the code just because they showed interest or charm. Access isn't a reward for curiosity. Crushes are not coupons. And chemistry alone is not a visa. Healthy intimacy doesn't rush the door. It accumulates. It grows through time, through consistency, through effort that doesn't need constant reminders, through emotional participation, not just presence, but engagement. Not who texted first or who felt exciting, not who showed up when you were vulnerable once and then vanished. Restoration begins the moment the question changes. When you stop asking, how can I keep them interested, and start asking, do they qualify for entry here to begin with? That shift alone restores so much of your power. And here's the part that I really want you to hear. It is never too late to install the locks, even if people have been walking in freely for years, even if you've been the open port, even if right now you're mid-pattern or mid-situationship or mid-what are we, you are allowed to change the rules without apologizing for the old ones. You are allowed to decide at any moment that access to you now requires care. Please don't settle for anything less than that. And creating boundaries doesn't mean that you've become cold, guarded, or difficult. It just means that you're finally honoring the way that you were designed to be treated in the first place. You are not here to be consumed by others. You are not here to absorb unfinished people while they figure themselves out. You are not here to be the fallback option when someone doesn't want to rise to the occasion. You are here to be chosen with clarity, with confidence, with intention, and chosen by someone who doesn't resent the lock because they were always willing to knock. And when you restore yourself this way, something subtle but powerful happens. You don't just protect your energy, you return to yourself, to your discernment, to your depth, to the version of you that doesn't need to audition for care. That's not selfish, that's restoration. And the people meant to meet you there, they won't struggle with the boundary. They'll recognize it as the doorway they were always hoping that you would build for yourself. If you're sitting here right now realizing, wow, I gave a lot of access to people who gave very little care, first of all, welcome. We have snacks and boundaries. You're not late, you're not broken, and you don't need to rewrite your entire personality or move to a new city or country. Though deleting one contact might just be enough. Self-worth isn't about shame, it's about alignment. Attention is easy, access is costly, intimacy is earned. And just to be clear, we're not really talking about ports or ships or docking schedules that definitely needed HR. Nope. Maritime law had nothing to do with this episode, unfortunately. We're talking about you, about me, our energy, our time, our bodies, our emotional labor. Who gets access to it and under what conditions? You don't have to give yourself away anymore to prove that you're worthy of being chosen. I'm here to tell you, you are worthy. You always were. Maybe it just took this episode to remind you of that. Now, before we go, I want to tee up what's coming up next because this conversation doesn't end here. Next up is a 2-part series on entitlement. And yes, everybody's invited to this group chat. Mics are going to be on, receipts may be present. Episode 1 is for the men, specifically the men who emotionally check out of the relationship. They stop pursuing their women, they stop showing up, they stop maintaining the relationship, but they still expect full access to a woman's body like intimacy is owed instead of earned. Spoiler, that's not confidence, that's audacity, and it's gross and a complete turnoff. Episode 2 turns the mirror around. We're talking to the women who withdraw. They shut down, they stop showing up emotionally, yet they still expect the relationship to function as if nothing changed. No communication, no engagement, but strong expectations. Because apparently love is supposed to run on vibes alone. Both episodes aren't about blame. They're about responsibility, about effort, about remembering that intimacy, whether it's emotional or physical, doesn't survive entitlement. Because relationships don't collapse from one side alone. They collapse when both people showing up honestly, just in different ways. It survives participation. So if today stirred something, please stay with me. We're not closing the gate to punish anyone. We're closing it to protect what matters. Because you weren't designed to be accessed endlessly. You were designed to be chosen intentionally. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. If this episode made you feel chosen, seen, called out, or personally attacked in a healing way, I hope, please don't panic. That was intentional. If this resonated with you, share it with somebody who appreciates deep conversations like I do. And if you want to keep this conversation going, or you just need to debrief because something landed a little too close to home, I'm always here. You can always reach me at ce.spillingtea@gmail.com. No pressure, I promise. I'm not checking any paperwork yet. I'm Colleen, and this is Spilling Tea. Until next time, guard your ports. Please check those credentials. And remember, chemistry is fun, but consistency is way hotter. Stay curious, my friends.